we're going to have a Michigan game exclusively on Peacock. East Carolina at Michigan, which I'm sure is going to be seen by hundreds of people on Saturday, September 2nd at noon on Peacock. So obviously this has been a thing with NBC and the announcement of some of the games that are on NBC. What do you make of this whole situation with Peacock and some of just the decisions that you've seen so far?
Well, I will say that after we did a series where we analyzed the TV ratings for 2022, and where Michigan, despite playing 3 unwatchable games to start the season, blowing those 3 opponents out by 50, 55 points each, but drawing as much as close to 4 million viewers for those games, that I put nothing past when you say that hundreds may be watching. I think hundreds may be watching only because of Michigan fans. If they procrastinate and don't download the app, get themselves signed up and everything, then they're going to be scrambling around on Saturday morning trying to figure out how to do it. And that might be the only barrier to Michigan fans flocking to Peacock and getting that done. I don't know that I don't want to discount the expense that some people have, because certainly, we all have our financial situations, and everyone, there's a number of people that don't have the resources to go out there and sign up for all these streaming devices and everything. But it's more so just this annoyance of, okay, now if I want to watch these teams or this conference or this or that, now I got to do this. And the Peacock, with their one Notre Dame game for maybe the last 2 or 3 seasons, has certainly not moved me to, their UNLV game. That was, I'm almost positive that was the one Peacock game for Notre Dame last year, was the UNLV game that they won by 45 points or whatever. So, I'm guessing that I'm going to have other games that I'm going to be watching that I don't need to lock in on Michigan and East Carolina. But for the Michigan fans, here you have your fair warning. You've got 3 months to figure it out and get locked in on Peacock.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be educational campaigns on, hey, everybody, if you want to support your team, here are the steps to get on. Because you have to think, they probably did this in the NFL when Amazon started doing games. I think, and by the way, I'm sure Amazon will be diving into college football at some point, since they do a game a week on the NFL. I wouldn't put it past them. So, and I guess this is just one of those things that we're going to start seeing in the industry a little bit more. But you mentioned UNLV, and Michigan is playing UNLV.
I did not realize.
And that's another game in the Michigan home games that are going to be played here in the early part of the season. This one is going to be on CBS, which is the first time I think Michigan's that we've had a game on CBS at 3:30 p.m. Eastern in a little while.
Yeah, when it comes to the CBS contract and even the NBC, and now we're seeing some of these non-conference games pop up, I think when the deal was signed and we all just had in our minds the magnitude of these awesome games, these awesome matchups, and this is what's going to flood, in addition to Fox now, CBS and NBC. Well, the reality of the schedule is that there's only so many of those games, and there's some really lightweight games sprinkled throughout the schedule, or more so than sprinkled throughout the schedule, pretty heavily baked into the first 3 or 4 weeks of the schedule, non-conference play. So I think when we all envisioned the Big Ten on NBC, the Big Ten on CBS, we were not thinking UNLV and East Carolina. Those weren't the thoughts that were going through our head. We're thinking USC and Michigan and Ohio State and fill in the blank. And we were going through all those matchups, not necessarily these, but it's part of the deal.
Yeah, I'm just imagining when Gary Danielson is going to have to call a game that's like 12-9, and it's like Iowa facing Northwestern or something. used to doing Tennessee, Bama, high octane offenses, and then we get 12-9 classic Big Ten games like that. I can only imagine how that's going to roll.
Well, I will say for a number of people out there that know Gary Danielson's background, he is a Purdue quarterback. And also Gary Danielson, let's say I'm going to pick a year about 2006 or 7 was about the year that he left for CBS. Prior to that, he was working for ABC doing a lot of Big Ten games and ESPN games.
How about that?
Yeah.
Little trivia there. But it is going to be interesting watching them do that after having a couple of years of Alabama, Tennessee, 52-49 and things like that. So it should be interesting. The next one that was announced. So again, you can see the full press release on this. But Bowling Green at Michigan, Big Ten Network. Okay, this one seems a little bit more in the wheelhouse. 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So now we're getting into, okay, a little bit more familiar territory. Big Ten Network has definitely been carrying the shows. This side note, this is actually one that I may go to in person. So we're talking about, my friend and I who went to the school are talking about which game we're going to go to. And I was like, well, Bowling Green could be an interesting one. Or this next one, Rutgers at Michigan. And we just had a story on this on Monday where the Rutgers Wire reporter had been talking about how it took about 3 years last time for Schiano to do to revitalize Rutgers, and it's at that point now. So who knows? Michigan is 8-1 all time in the rivalry or matchup or whatever you want to call it. So that one is still TBD, but a noon Eastern kickoff on that one.
Rutgers beat Michigan.
Yeah.
Did they win a game?
Yeah, in 2014, one time.
2014. Okay. The first year in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and almost in 2020. Very close.
Yes, I remember that game. Kate McNamara saved Michigan. Yes. Remember that game. I'm missing out. Okay. Rutgers beat Michigan. Didn't Maryland beat Michigan that year as well?
Probably a lot of people beat Michigan that year. We went. Michigan went 5-7.
Yeah.
That's what we call the dark times. And then of course we did hear about the Michigan at Penn State big noon kickoff. We already heard about that one just the other day. That was announced. That'll be a big noon kickoff game on Fox. So Michigan is spared a night game at Beaver Stadium, but Michigan is 7-6. In games at Beaver Stadium. And I think we talked with Argraw, one of the Penn State fans on the Big Ten Live show a couple of times, that it really does depend on the year and how good Michigan is versus how good Penn State is. If it's a push, then you might give it to Penn State at Beaver Stadium. In this case, does look like Michigan is going to be a little bit better position, but there have been people saying Penn State could be a contender for the playoffs. So who knows? But big noon kickoff for this one. So just like in 2021 when Michigan was spared a Wisconsin night game and they got big noon kickoff, it has already been announced for Michigan at Penn State.
I can't recently think of a matchup between two teams as good as Michigan and Penn State were last year. And of course, Michigan was one of the 2 or 3 or 4 best teams in the country, and Penn State was a notch below. But where I remember one team dominating physically, and so I'm thinking about James Franklin leading into this Michigan game. Does he show his team that film to motivate them to say, you got embarrassed, we got embarrassed, physically just beaten to a pulp practically every play? The yardage totals were just completely on Michigan's side, rushing the football and defending the run, or you just don't even want to touch that game tape, because for as good as Penn State again turned out to be, winning the Rose Bowl, man, Michigan, just a lot is going to have to change, and things do change from year to year, certainly in college football. But Penn State is going to have to bring a much more physical effort to the field this time against Michigan.
Yeah, and I will say that there were a few plays that Franklin dialed up that were pretty lights out plays. That when we were just in the first half of the game, even though Michigan it seemed like they were winning in terms of the stat lines. I got to give Franklin some credit for pulling a couple rabbits out of his hat, and Sean Clifford running for like 60 some yards, and some of what we saw there. That if they do that this time the entire game, and the defense is able to better contain the running backs, then could be one of those. I know some people are predicting a Michigan or a Penn State win here. I think it's a reasonable take given that it's Beaver. So I think Michigan's going to pull it off, but we saw that first half. We saw Franklin, despite all odds, calling some cuckoo bananas stuff, and Penn State was ahead at one point. So that I think that just like with Michigan versus Michigan State, even though I know it's more of a, I mean, I still consider this a rivalry, even though it's more of a recent rivalry, because basically just like with Michigan versus Michigan State and Michigan versus Ohio State, you kind of have to toss out the book a little bit, because even if Michigan is doing much better and is higher ranked by November 11th, I still think it could, like, you don't know. You really don't know. So we'll see. But definitely one to bookmark for sure. A couple of housekeeping notes. We've got, of course, we encourage everybody to join our Patreon and Discord, talk Wolverines all the time. Go to patreon.com/MarkRogersTV. You can also become a YouTube member. So just a couple of weeks ago, Mark, you and I were both on when we were, you were representing the Ohio State side, and we had some Clemson people like Jordan Bowman who were representing the Clemson side. And I was just along for the ride on that one. That was just a fun little thing to watch as finally I get to be a spectator. I don't have to, take part in the usual Michigan, Ohio State banter. But it was a fun one to watch. And if you were a Patreon member, you got to actually enjoy that either on screen or you could chill on the sidelines. Well, I'm sure there will be more like that. We'll do watch parties and hangouts and everything else, especially as the season comes on.
We will definitely deliver 2 debates involving Michigan for sure this summer. This is my vow to everyone. Floods or famine would have to come for us not to take part in 2 Michigan debates this summer. One will involve the 2016 Ohio State game and us watching Ohio State, Michigan, the 2016 call. And as we did, as John just outlined for the Clemson game, I think we did it in a nice pace where we watched the entire game, but we fast forwarded through. So we weren't sitting there for 4 hours, and we went through the game rather quickly, but we caught all the key plays. We broke down all the controversial calls and everything. We will do the same Ohio State and Michigan. So sign up either on Patreon or our YouTube memberships. It'll be available to either group, so you don't have to pick or choose. Patreon, search Mark Rogers TV, or on YouTube. And then the other one will be the Michigan-Nebraska 1997 debate. We will definitely fire up a live stream and debate those 2 teams from 1997 in a co-national championship.
Wow. So mark this space, because we're 2 of the most heated topics in Michigan football history: the '97 national championship and the 2016 The Spot game. Both apparently going to be talked about. So join Patreon, become a YouTube member to take part in that. And then we also want to give thanks to our sponsor, Aura. Get yourself a 2-week free trial. And it actually, people may not know that this tremendously helps out the channel. So big time.